What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. This week, Nintendo pushed an update for the Switch 2 and the Switch 1, and while the single line explaining what happened here was very vague, turns out there was a lot more happening behind the scenes. Go figure, and we'll take a look at that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Capcom in an interview as they sort of talked about the future for Monster Hunter Wilds and reflecting on the game post-release and how they seem to view the PS5 as a barrier and the Switch 2 as a massive opportunity. And we'll also be talking about Perfect Dark as we got more information since its cancellation, and then apparently Take-Two was looking to buy the game and publish it. Yeah, we'll look at that, all of that, again, and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. And we're going to start today with a new game heading into Nintendo Switch Online N64 and how it may actually add some more validity to that deblurring that took place with that CRT image that showed several N64 games that could be going into the service. First, we'll start, though, with the announcement. This is over on Nintendo's account, where they say the future is Forsaken. Forsaken 64 is coming to the Nintendo 64 Classics Mature app on September 4th. So that'll be live tomorrow for NSO Expansion Pack members. The thing I remember about this game is the cover just was not representative, at least I think it was, for the game itself. The front cover was like a woman with like Forsaken tattooed on her cheek. And then I played the game at a friend's house at one point, and it was like a first-person descent shooter style game, completely different than what I was taking away from the cover art there. But still, with Forsaken 64 being announced, there was that image that people noticed for the CRT trailer that showed blurred box art for N64 games. And, well, take a look. Forsaken was indeed one of them. That goes along with Donkey Kong 64, Glover, Rayman 2, and Super Smash Bros. So while not concrete necessarily because Forsaken 64 is in the mature app and wouldn't be next to these, it still makes you wonder, wait a minute, that just came true. Does that mean that we could have DK64, Smash Brothers, Glover, and Rayman pop up here soon? I mean, it's possible as part of the library, and really, why not? So we'll keep an eye out for that going forward. Otherwise, though, Forsaken 64 will be available tomorrow in that N64 app. Also, speaking of Rayman, I have more good news coming off of the announcement that the future of Rayman was being explored and appeared to be full speed ahead for the developers behind Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, now moving over to, I guess, create a new Rayman? Well, not so fast, because it appears that that remake is indeed being worked on right now, and this we can see over on Insider Gaming, where they say in October 2024, Insider Gaming exclusively reported that development began on a Rayman remake under the codename Steambot. While we do not have too much information on the news, it's understood to be tentatively targeting a late 2026 release date, as the project has been going incredibly well, according to those familiar with the game's development. In addition to Steambot, it's also understood that Ubisoft wants to take the Rayman franchise further than just a remake too, and has already made preliminary plans to develop Rayman 4. So that's great news. Okay, so we get the first Rayman completely remade, which is great because they already said it's 30 years. That's a while. You could remake it, have a younger audience maybe find it, and then, okay, now we can have a bigger audience now going into this brand new Rayman title that, well, they say by the end of the decade. Sounds crazy to say that out loud, but that would then be 4 years after the 2026 release of Rayman Remake. And yes, here soon we're going to start really talking about the 2030s for games that are starting development now for when they'd be completed and coming to market. But they're good news for Rayman fans. Seems like at least over the next few years, we're going to have some stuff to look forward to. Oh, and we did have a Call of Duty movie that was announced. This we can see over on Discussing Film. Just saying, a Call of Duty movie is officially in the works at Paramount. Paramount also have the rights to expand Call of Duty into a universe of multiple films and TV shows, and I mean, yeah, it'd probably do well. Call of Duty, massive, especially in the more casual audience, just mainstream for gaming. It tends to be one of those games where like a casual gamer may buy 2 or 3 games a year, and Call of Duty's probably in there next to a sports game or two. So I think it would do well on the big screen, at least from the name itself. Does the movie end up being good? That would be the big question mark there. But I think either TV or movie, people would at least tune in one way or the other because they'd be curious, since, well, they probably buy the game every year. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and a recent update that they issued for the Switch 1 and the Switch 2. And while you can see this over on their website with the announcement, where it just says general system stability improvements to enhance the user's experience, which they pretty much use constantly if there's no obvious update or any obvious upgrade we can say are features being added. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean things haven't changed behind the scenes. So one example here, Oatmeal Dome, who will typically look into a lot of the back end of these updates and what it could have changed, says that the patch notes list stability as the sole change on Switch 1. The controller handling code and web browser were updated. No info for Switch 2. Maybe there were more backwards compatibility fixes. Well, to go along with that, we can see this over on Universo Nintendo, who seem to be going through different pieces of code and data mining, as I saw this kind of popping up on Twitter X as they were sort of discussing it. And it looks like we have some games that are now backwards compatible with the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, or have had some issues ironed out. So they have the Beat 'em Up Collection, Bright Memory Infinite Gold Edition, Killing Time Resurrected, Melty Blood, and then we have Melty Blood Deluxe Edition, and Artificial Dream in Arcadia. Now, there are still some games that aren't working. I know Nier Automata gets thrown around a lot, which that's a game that I mean, come on, we just need a Switch 2 version of that game. Like, really, that's one that I think would look and play awesome on the Switch 2 if they showed up with a free update. And even then, just put the game on sale. It would probably sell several 100,000 copies in a week. Like, no problem there, because the game is that good, but naturally it was kind of hamstrung by the Switch 1. I mean, coming in at 30 FPS for a game like that, let's open that one up a bit there for the Switch 2. There is another update that happened, actually last night. That's Super Mario Party Jamboree. Says the update, which is version 2.2.0, adjusts the original game to render at 1080p on Switch 2 if you own the Switch 2 edition, which previously only the Jamboree TV part would have increased resolution. To follow up, they did say that it appears that maybe it was already 1080p in TV mode, and this could be 1080p for handheld too, and that would, I feel like, make more sense, considering that that's the big hang-up we have right now on Switch 1 to Switch 2 backwards compatibility. 720p games in handheld mode for Switch 1, and then you try to expand that to 1080p, really you're just stretching the image, unless the game was already rendering at 1080p, which some games were doing that, so that lines up perfectly, like Hyrule Warriors being one of them. You're going to get a blurrier image in handheld mode. May not be as noticeable, as strange as it is, as noticeable in docked mode, because there are many games that do shoot for 1080p as like the high point, but with dynamic resolution never really gets to that spot, but with the Switch 2 is able to. So we're still in flux right now with backwards compatibility, even what will get updated, as we're just seeing random things pop up. I think like Soma got updated kind of out of nowhere, and it just made it made the resolution higher, and in that case, the game just looks significantly better and clearer. So there's still a lot of stuff, again, I would like to see updated, as mentioned with something like Nier Automata. That's a big one. But now it's just kind of this drip feed and slow rollout of Nintendo still fixing backwards compatibility issues with these general system stability. So if you ever see any of these general updates happen where they don't really get in depth as to what was fixed, go back and check out some of those backwards compatible problem games, because there is a chance that maybe it's been cleared up with the latest update. Next up, let's talk about Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion. That is coming out September 5th, so here in just a few days. Well, reviews went live yesterday, and there's not necessarily a bunch of reviews, but we do at least have enough to start to see the score populate, which we can see this over on Metacritic, currently coming in at a 70. Now, the most reviewed system right now is the Switch 2, and that's with 12 reviews. So again, they're coming in very slowly, and I think that's just review codes went out late, or so, hard to say. But either way, this is what we have to work with right now. So take a look at some of the reviews. Loot Level Chill gave it an 85. That's on the high end, saying Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion is a fast-paced mech combat game with an impressive world to explore and so many customization options. CG Magazine gave it a 75, saying despite not living up to its full potential on Switch 2, Daemon X Machina is still an incredibly fast-paced and fun action RPG. And then we have Nintendo Life here on the opposite end of the spectrum with a 60, saying Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion is a decent mech game with plenty of depth in its weapons setups and lots of cool loot to discover in its large open world maps. The combat is flexible, it's fast, and it's very often plenty of fun. However, Performance issues, and they go on to say that don't sweat it just for the Switch 2 owners, seems to be with other platforms, make for a janky experience in places with mushy controls and limp feedback. It's just not nearly as polished as it could be in this respect. With stutters loading into new areas and low-res textures a common sight, apparently this is also on other systems, the overall feeling here is of a game that needs a few patches and tweaks to get it where it needs to be. And I mean, you can see it with the demo. So if you're unaware and you're curious about this, Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion does have a demo across all platforms, and you can see it with the Switch 2. It just wasn't running great. A lot of stutters, the frame rate seemed to be all over the place, the text is really small for some reason, so there are a lot of issues there on the performance side, the optimization side, I guess, and here's hoping they can work that out, because it's unfortunate when, for example, someone's like, oh, this game is really, really fun, I'm having a blast with it, but man, it just does not run well, and that's the version you have these people review, so that's just kind of how it is. They're not going to necessarily go back and update their review 4 or 5 patches in a year later. This is kind of how it is at release, and it's strange that Marvelous would push it out in this condition, other than they want to make it for the holiday season and have it out there with the Switch 2 with its first holiday. Like that, the buying season stuff, I at least understand why they're doing that from their angle, but also I feel like you'd want to get it out there in a better overall condition. So my recommendation, download the demo if you're curious, see what you think of the performance there, and if everything seems fine, I guess go for it when it releases later this week. I guess the nice thing is this is one of those games that will be fully on the cartridge, so at the very least, no game key card here anyway. Next up, let's talk about Capcom and Monster Hunter Wilds and how they view the PS5 as a barrier and the Switch 2 more as an opportunity going forward. Apparently one that caught them off guard. Again, as that kind of happened with the Switch 1 when that came out, but it wasn't just Capcom, it was a bunch of different companies, which, I mean, coming off of the Wii U, you were going to be a bit more conservative about Nintendo's next offering. Still, though, we can see this. This is overall in Nikkei, and it is translated over using Google Translate, so here we go. This is with Capcom President Hirohiro Sugimoto. This is about the current and future of Capcom. With the question, you've achieved initial sales of 10 million units. That's for Monster Hunter Wilds, and that's what a lot of this conversation seemed to center around. And they say, you need to build on that, which is, can we just say that is crazy to be like, wow, you sold 10 million copies in a month. Gotta be more. You gotta build on that. Says, that's correct. However, we also found that the PS5 barrier is unexpectedly large. The console costs about 80,000 yen in Japanese yen. When you factor in the cost of software and monthly subscriptions, it comes out to about 100,000 yen at the time of purchase. This is not an amount that can be easily reached, especially for younger generations. The situation is not limited to Japan, but is similar overseas as well. Our next challenge is to overcome these obstacles and get Monster Hunter Wilds to as many people as possible. Sales will begin in the future, so we are currently formulating a strategy to take advantage of these opportunities to boost sales throughout the year. The Nintendo Switch 2 was released in June 2025 at a price of 49,980 yen, and the response was better than we had expected. While prices varied by country, this reaffirmed the high level of cost consciousness among ordinary consumers. So a lot to take away from here. I joked about the 10 million number. It's like, gotta do more than that. Well, you figure they want to at least match Monster Hunter World, which that they still have a bit of a mountain to climb there, as just conservatively is like 21 million. They do count the expansion with that as well as like a separate one, but then they add it in, it's 28 million or so. Basically they're targeting that. Oh, we're going to get to 28 million because, let's face it, there'll be some kind of expansion, I'm sure, for Monster Hunter Wilds in the future. However, when they bring up the idea of the PS5 being a barrier, they're not really wrong in the sense that the PS5 isn't cheap. So when they talk about that, and then they talk about the Switch 2 in like a different light as being more cost conscious, I think it's important to note that they appear to be referring completely, at least for this, to Japan, like that market. And it makes sense because Monster Hunter is big, it's massive in Japan. You just look at the numbers of Monster Hunter Rise when that came out on the Switch, it was immediately over 1 million units sold in its first week. Whereas with Monster Hunter Wilds, when that came out on the PS5 earlier this year, it immediately got out the gate to 600,000 copies. It's like, okay, that is quite a bit less. Now there's just less PS5 systems, and with the price increase in general as it has happened throughout the generation, it's not getting easier to sell these things. So Capcom saying, hey, Switch 2 is off to a better start than we were expecting. it sounds like the plan is being formulated for Capcom to really go all in with the Switch 2. And you figure that means Monster Hunter Wilds goes over to the system. I do question how that's going to run necessarily, because they're having a hard time getting it to run on just about everything else, like decent. While I think they can do it, I believe they can, it's still not something that's necessarily looks like it'd be a smooth transition over. I mean, they're still trying to get it running on PC, and that I think should be the biggest takeaway for them is it was popular on PC when it came out. Immediately went up to like 1 million concurrent players in the first day. It's like, wow, this is rolling on PC. But then the game was poorly optimized. It was clear they didn't have PC in mind as a lead platform, quote unquote, and I think it suffered because that still is mostly negative on Steam right now, and word of mouth, I think, really did a lot of damage on the PC side, which if Capcom is looking at the PS5 as a barrier, they should also be looking at PC as a big opportunity going forward, but they just seem to get fixated there on the PS5. Now they're like, ooh, maybe we should have looked around a bit more here and tried to figure this out. Well, the Switch 2 wasn't there for them when Monster Hunter Wilds came out. It is now. So we'll see if Capcom shows up more and more as we go forward, especially with a direct, we think, happening next week. Let's see if Capcom shows up there, we'll say starting with some of these Resident Evil remakes, because that makes a ton of sense to move over as soon as possible and get the ball rolling there. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Perfect Dark, which I know is still a sore spot because Microsoft really went years and years and years with this new studio that they formed from the ground up, the initiative, and they were going to revive Perfect Dark, this big thing that shows gameplay, and it's canceled. It was like immediate too. It's like, yeah, it's gone. So, oh, okay. Well, apparently Take-Two was looking to either buy, it's still kind of fuzzy with the way it's worded, but let's just take a look here. This is from Jason Schreier over on Bloomberg, saying Embracer had come close to striking a deal in which the video game publisher Take-Two Interactive would purchase the game from Microsoft Xbox, which owned the rights. Take-Two would then fund and publish the game, but the talks collapsed at least in part because the companies involved were unable to come to terms over long-term ownership of the Perfect Dark franchise. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of fuzzy. At first read, it sounds like Microsoft's going to sell Perfect Dark to Take-Two, but then it's like, oh, they were going to publish the game and Embracer was going to be part of it, and you kind of see where it was a little messy there, and yeah, between two businesses, a bit of a struggle as to who gets to retain ownership of Perfect Dark after this game comes out. The whole point is Crystal Dynamics have been doing like most of the work on the game. That's why they were brought in to help get it to the finish line, as they would provide a significant number of developers, with the initiative kind of being that smaller, agile, creative entity. And then Crystal Dynamics would come in with the brute force of the developers to get it there. So if that's the case, and the game was at least moving along, yeah, you could have Embracer come in, or Embracer with Take-Two come in, and they would fund it and it would get to the finish line, but doesn't seem like they could strike a deal. It is crazy to think that Take-Two might have come in, either bought Perfect Dark or bought the publishing rights to Perfect Dark, and then you have Microsoft, Embracer, and Take-Two all involved with the revival of a game that really hasn't seen any meaningful release since the beginning of the Xbox 360 days. But none of that's happening because it all fell through, so we're kind of back to where we started with Perfect Dark just being canceled. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played Monster Hunter Wilds? 75% say no, I haven't played Monster Hunter Wilds. 12% said they played it on the PS5, 10% on the PC, and 3% on the Xbox Series. I looked through the comments. There are many of them that say I'm waiting for it to be optimized on the PC version and to see that people are saying it's running really well, you're good to go, before I buy into this thing. There are also some who are like, yeah, if it comes to the Switch 2, I'll pick it up there. Or I also see some saying, you know, I'm waiting for a sale. If it goes on sale and like Monster Hunter Worlds got down to what, $10 or something? That was also mentioned in the interview. It was like, hey, we're going to put Monster Hunter Wilds on sale eventually. And then we expect more and more people to buy into the game at that time. So yeah, again, it wouldn't shock me if people looked at that price, 70, heard about some of the performance issues, like, I'll hang out and wait. It'll get cheaper. More patches will come out. Hopefully more optimization will happen. And by the time I get it for 20 bucks or so brand new, it'll be running significantly better, and I'll just have a better experience overall. So maybe they're eyeing up, we'll say Capcom, for the end of the year with some of the holiday shopping and some of the sales they can tack onto it, and it gets down to like $30 or something. That might be their plan for now, but yeah, we'll see if they have any other plans after that to help push the game along, because I mean, the way that they're talking, 10 million is just the start. They're looking probably, and it sounds crazy, but they might be looking for 30 million with this thing so it can pass up Monster Hunter Worlds in the long run. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Hawk, who says, doesn't matter if Outlaws looks good or not, nobody is going to play that on the Switch 2. You might be wondering why I picked this. Okay, so I think some people will probably play Outlaws on the Switch 2. The reason I picked this is because I saw 76 replies under it. And I said, there's no way there are 76 replies defending Outlaws for this. So I looked, and this is crazy. It is a long conversation and string of bots going back and forth talking. Now, I know there are bots in the comments because there's bots in every comment section now on YouTube, and it's so obvious, and you go through and you try to remove them, and more of them pop up, and you ban accounts that are bots, and they keep showing up. But I was looking through it, and you're reading, it is a legitimate conversation for like 50 replies from multiple bots. It was the craziest thing I've seen in a while under this one comment. I have no idea why it doesn't matter if Outlaws looks good or not. Nobody is going to play that on the Switch 2. All of a sudden triggered like 10 bots to show up and start talking about real estate and investing and financial freedom in the future. But there you go. Apparently Outlaws is able to get that done. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here on a card. Or maybe you want to hear more about the PlayStation 4 and how it's incredibly easy to hack it in 2025 with a recent breakthrough. I'll leave that right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.